Page 144, Parshas Vayeitzei. It's the parsha that talks about leaving town. So safe trip to those who are leaving after class. That's the cameraman and
Yeah, I told him.
then half trouble.
Because I governed it, so I was wondering where I am.
Make sure he's back for next week.
Hey, Megabus goes to Baltimore for a buck.
Are you on commission? Not everyone gets the dollar. Lane gets the dollars, and not everyone is as talented as most people are not. That's a reality. In this parsha, Yaakov makes his journey to Haran, to the house of his future father-in-law, marries several wives on the way, comes back with a nice family. That's what the parsha is all about. There are key words to really understand the message here that we're going to focus on. And it has to do with the fact that he is building here. He is building. He's building a family, and he's building the destiny of the people of Israel. When we talk about building, we talk about a binyan, the structure of a building. And of course, we're going to address the even. And the even, the stone, the even, which is the main ingredient in the binyan, on page 144, the even is going to be the main word that will make its appearance in this week's portion, because a binyan in even is what's necessary to have your building to fulfill not just the building of your family, not just building within, but reaching out as well. There is a need for a binyan, and we'll explain very well what we are referring to. The first verse, Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva. He leaves, he departs from Be'er Sheva, and he goes towards Haran, Harana. The simple meaning would be that he is on his way to Haran, and therefore the reference in the next verse to the fact that he stops somewhere on the way, which we know very well happens to be the Temple Mount. There's no contradiction based on the simple reading. There is absolutely no contradiction between mentioning Haran and mentioning the location of Jerusalem, because he never reached Haran. The text is just telling us that he is on his way to Haran. So I could say, I was traveling from Toronto to Chicago, and on my way I stopped in Detroit and I went to the Dunkin' Donuts. So there's no contradiction there by saying, wait a second, Chicago is way after Detroit. There's no contradiction there because I'm on the way to Chicago. But the rabbis have a little bit of a different reading of it. And there's a well-known midrash that he actually makes his way to Haran. He reaches northern Israel, and then he says, wait a second, I missed an opportunity, and he makes a U-turn. And the rabbis share with us this concept of kfitzat haderech, that somehow the journey was shortened for him. Perhaps the soil spiritually moved in his direction. But the main idea is that there's going to be a link between the location, the place where he is going to sleep, the place where he's going to have that vision, and Haran. There's going to be a relationship between the two. So we're going to place the border of northern Israel, where Israel meets the region of Haran, where he interacts for a very long period of time with his father-in-law and builds his family. There's a strong link between the border and Jerusalem. So these are two locations that geographically are very far from one another, especially at times when you do not have vehicles. But nevertheless, there's a relationship between the two. And that's what this verse is telling us, that he is going towards Haran. Vayivga b'makom. Verse 2, he encounters the place. He encounters a place which the rabbis tell us is the Makom HaMikdash, Vayalen Sham. And he goes ahead and he spends the night there. And he takes mi avnei hamakom. So this is the first place we're going to find the even, a key word in this week's portion, in this building portion. He builds a family. He's going to build the message of the people of Israel. He's the patriarch that is the one that builds the Jewish home, but he remembers what the mission of the Jewish people are. We are not a nation that believes only in ourselves. We are not a nation that believes that all the others are infidels. We have a mission that we relate to humanity. but the binyan begins, the first reference to a binyan is taking place right here when he takes an even, when he takes one of the stones of the place and he uses it as a pillow. Today we have better pillows, right? Obviously, what do we have? They have smart pillows, you know, those smart pillows and they have foam pillows and they have feather pillows if you don't have allergies. But in those days he settled from avnei hamakom and he uses it either to protect his head or actually to sleep on it. And he has a vision. And the vision, verse 12, the ladder, mutzav arza, the ladder, well grounded, reaches heaven, and angels, olim veyordim bo, the angels are ascending and descending it. What do the angels have to do with anything? What does the vision mean? We've heard several explanations throughout the years. We've heard the idea that angels are there to protect him. So now he is leaving the land of Israel. There are different types of angels. The mission of the Jew in Israel is very different than the mission we have to achieve outside of Israel. So it's like a change of a guard. Now if you take that explanation, you realize that this is a vision that relates to the crossing of the border. Right? A vision of a change of the guard. When is there a change of a guard? Right? You go ahead and you drive from the United States to Canada. Right? You did some, or Canada to the United States. So you can have Canadian officials, and then right after you see the Canadian officials, you'll see the U.S. officials. I have this dilemma that at times when you leave the United States and come into Canada, you have right after you pay the toll. I take the Niagara Falls. This is my minute Yisrael from Deris, and I take the Niagara Falls, not the Lewiston Quinston. Lewiston Quinston always causes me time delays. Niagara Falls does not. It's, my minute, everybody should follow their own. So now what happens is I am a dual citizen. And as a dual citizen, what am I supposed to do? When I go into the United States, I'm supposed to declare myself as a U.S. citizen, others as well. When I come to Canada, I declare myself as Canadian. Now, at times, when I'm leaving the United States, they have a patrol there where they are seeking people who are leaving the country. So imagine that I'm leaving U.S., coming into Canada, and there are people there are officials of the U.S. government. They're not so much customs, they're probably looking for other gute Sachen, people that are trying to leave the country. And they are stopping the car and they ask the question, what citizen are you of? What's your citizenship? And there it's unclear for me exactly, because I am going into Canada, so perhaps I should identify myself as Canadian, or am I supposed to go ahead and identify myself as a U.S. because I'm talking to U.S. officials? This is a dilemma I have when I face the individuals. But we do understand that the change of a guard from U.S. officials to Canadian is at a border. If this vision is a vision of angels, and there's a shift from the angels of the land of Israel to the angels of Chutz La'aretz, so this is a border vision, a vision that should take place at the border. And nevertheless, where is it taking place? On Mekom HaMikdash, Harabayit, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And I'm emphasizing this because it will clarify things later on, that this is a location that, yes, is in the heart of Israel, but it is linked to the border. So please remember that concept. Now, another explanation of what is taking place here is the concept of Galut, that these angels that are ascending and descending talk about superpowers. That there are going to be superpowers that will reach their heights, right? The Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, they are olim, and when they are in power, you think they'll be in power for eternity. But God is telling him, worry not, that the way the world works is that there are superpowers that reach the top, and then they go down. They ascend, they descend. So this is a vision that relates to the concept of exile, that Jews are going to have to deal with superpowers, but wait around, time will change realities. Again, a vision of exile, because here's a man going out of the land of Israel on his way into exile. A border vision, we could call it. Now, he is offered, God promises him to return, God promises him to protect him, and therefore on page 146, he wakes up, he is inspired, God is present here, and therefore he commits himself to build a home there. And in verse 18, he wakes up in the morning, Vayashkem Yaakov baboker, verse 18, Vayikach et ha'even. He takes this stone, the stone that he used beforehand, and he places it as a pillar, and he pours oil on top of it. So he consecrates it, he designates it as a stone that will be part of a very significant structure. This is the house of God, and he takes an oath that the Even, again, verse 22, so this is like the third or fourth appearance of this Even in verse 22, which ends the chapter, that God, you should know that this stone, which I have set up as a pillar, shall become a house of God, and I will tithe everything, I will connect you, I will relate to you, appreciate you, recognize you, because when you tithe, you recognize that everything you have is indeed from a higher being. It will be done right here. This is going to be my spiritual place, my spiritual home. It will guide my people for eternity. The Even is going to achieve that. Wonderful. So we walk out of this chapter of him having some clarity of what's happening to him. That yes, he's going into the exile. Challenges will be present, but nevertheless he is linked. His eyes are always going to be towards this house. And that's the Jewish essence, that even when we are in Galut, we always talk about a return to Jerusalem. And that's how he is going to live in this exile, remembering his commitment that yes, there's no structure there yet, but I shall be back. And that will keep me connected, keep me inspired, keep me alive. And even when I pray in the exile, I will be facing that location. Now, next chapter, chapter 29. He reaches the east. Okay, so this is the northeast of the land of Israel. And here we have a detailed description of the first thing he sees. And what does he see? He sees in the field 3 flocks of sheep. And they are waiting, they are laying around by a well. And what's stopping them from just providing the water for the flock? Because on page 148, verse 2, what is present there? Ha'even gdola pi haber. There we go again. Another stone. Even. We just finished the whole chapter that focuses about an Even. He comes into exile, and again there's an Even. And then we're given here a detailed description of how to give water to your flock. And what was done in verse 3 was when the flock, ve'ene'esfu shama kol ha'adarim, it seems that all the flocks would assemble there, ve'galelu et ha'even, and what they would do is they would be golel, they would roll, right? You want to be megale something, you want to reveal something. So you have to be golel, you have to roll the stone. The Talmud talks about the impurities that relate to cemeteries. And the Talmud tells us that the golel is tameh, that if you touch a golel, it brings about different levels of tumah. So what is a golel? So Rashi, sitting in France in the 11th, 12th century, is not exactly sure what it is, but from the context, it talks about a cover of a kever, cover of a burial lot. So therefore Rashi says that the stone that covers the grave, that's a golel. The context clarifies it. But if you would ask Rashi, why did they call it a golel? Rashi probably would tell us, I'm not sure, but the context makes it clear to me what it's about. If you visit Israel, you will realize that the way they buried in those days was that they would bury in caves. It was a period of time that they would take a body, bury it in a cave. The bodies would lay in a catacomb on shelves in essence. After 12 months, when the flesh would decompose, they would take the bones and they would gather the bones and put them in a box called an ossuary. If you were wealthy, you would make one out of stone. If you were poor, you would make one out of wood. The benefit of being poor is that 2,000 years later, no one's going to play with your bones if you kept it in a wood box because it will decompose. If you were nebach, wealthy, and you made one out of stone, so your ossuary will be sitting in a museum. So just you should know there are benefits of not having a lot of money. So that was the reality. So the ossuaries that were made out of stone would preserve the bones, and they would be osefet atzamot, and the Talmud talks about the day of Likut Atzamot, that people would mourn the day that they would gather the bones of their parents. That was the norm, that was the routine. So you could visit, when I was 10 or 11 years old, with a few friends, we went to a place called Kivrei HaSanhedrin. It's a neighborhood in Yerushalayim, near a place called Sanhedria, and they have in it the catacombs where they believe the Sanhedrin were buried. Now they close it up, but in those days we went with matches and with candles. 11-year-olds should be playing with that, right? And we burned the cobwebs, and we climbed through the catacombs, and you saw it. It was quite creepy, but good for Halloween. That you could go ahead and walk through the catacombs. That's where they buried people. Now the problem is they would bury a person. They didn't want animals coming in and taking them. They didn't want bandits coming and grabbing. At times there were those, not based on Jewish tradition, that they would put gold and silver as well in the grave. So what did they would do? They would seal it. We did this in Bet Sherim as well, if you remember. You remember that for sure.
Remember.
Yeah, that in Bet Sherim they also had it. That they had these catacombs, but they would seal it. How would they seal it? They would take a gigantic stone and they would roll it to close the entrance to the catacomb. And the large stone, they would be golel it. They would roll it. And when the Talmud talks about a golel, what's the Talmud talking about? That large stone. So when you see it, you know exactly what it's about. That was a golel. And that's what we're talking about here, that there was a large stone that if you want, you could roll it, or you could roll it out and be megaleh, reveal what is there. So the word gal is an important word in this text. And the text is telling us that v'galelu et ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er, they would roll off this large stone from the well, and they would need everyone to do it. It was a very heavy stone, not possible for one person to do it. You needed a team, so therefore they would wait around until everyone gathers. Yaakov turns to them and has a conversation with them, and he asks them, number one, where are you from? Do you know Lavan? The next question he asks them, why are you people waiting around? And they explain to him that we need the whole team to roll the stone. So therefore, in verse 8, Vayomeru, they explain to him, Lo nuchal, it is not possible, we are unable to go ahead and provide for the flock, Ad asher yesvu kol ha'adarim, until we have all the shepherds gathered together. And what they do is v'galelu et ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er. We need a whole team to do it. This is not something that can be achieved by one person. So now, in verse 10, when Yaakov sees Rachel, he decides, and she's coming with the flock, so he decides to do it on his own. Vayehi, verse 10, Kasher ra'a Yaakov et Rachel. When Yaakov sees Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother, and he spots her with the flock, who of course needs the water, so he goes forward and rolls the stone off the mouth of the well. Vayagel et ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er. He does alone what others cannot do alone. They need a whole team. What's fascinating is the fact that the Torah is describing in such detail how shepherds would provide water for their animals in a specific region where on the surface this is insignificant. So my father gave the following explanation. He would note that sometimes a person on the right spiritual level will see things, and it's what you would call a prophecy based on act. It was acted out. People were doing things, but it was really a message to him. He was supposed to get a message from it. And the message was, we are believers that the human race has a mission to perfect the world, to do things in the world, to bring about, to teach the messages of God, to teach morality. And it could have been done by humanity if they would just do it together. Humanity failed. Humanity fails in their mission. Adam does not achieve it. Noah does not achieve it. So who takes over the responsibility of fixing the world, teaching and sharing the messages of the Rabbanu Shalom, teaching ethics, telling a pagan world that God is not interested in human sacrifice? God wants ethics. God wants us to be honest. Who is the one that carries that responsibility? The people of Israel, Yaakov. So therefore, we know very well that wells symbolize values. When Avraham is building wells, what does he build wells for? Vayikra b'shem Hashem. Well, where there are wells, there are going to be people. If there are people there that need water, he is going to be providing them not just with water, but with messages, with teachings, with values. A well is more than a physical well, it's a spiritual well. That was Avraham. That's what Yitzchak later on did as well. And that's what Yaakov is doing here. He, in essence, is having a vision and an understanding that you should know humanity is not fulfilling their mission with a well. Humanity was supposed to come together and uncover the well. It wasn't done. He is taking over that responsibility. That's what Yaakov does. He reveals the water of the well. So when there is an Evan, when beforehand, in the first chapter we talk about the Evan is very, very Jewish. It's a Jewish stone. It's a Jewish temple, right? We pray towards it. We are inspired to it. We get guidance from rabbinic authorities by the temple. It's very, very Jewish. But we know that the temple does not end but with us. Beti bete filai kareh l'cholamim. It relates to humanity. We have a message and we have a mission to reach out to humanity. And humanity, the message of reaching out to humanity is not just in the land of Israel, but it's even outside of the land of Israel. And that's what's taken here. There's a revelation, the idea of Yaakov revealing, moving the heaven and bringing the water, and this is outside of the land, is that very significant message. You know, there was a rabbi in the beginning of the 13th century in France. His name was Rabbi Moshe from Kusi. That was his name. And he was very inspired. The years leading to 1240, there was an awakening among the people of Israel because the year 1240 was the beginning of the 6th millennium. In other words, up until then, the year 1238 was what was the year? It was 4,000. Daled Alafim, 4,000. Taf, Kuf, Tzadichet. In other words, they were still in the 5th millennium. We are in the 6th. The date where there was a switchover was 1240. There was a belief by many that it's a messianic year. It's a year that will bring the Messiah. So there was an awakening. There was an Aliyah movement leading to that period of time. In 1211, there was an Aliyah movement. And people were spiritual. So this Rabbi Moshe from Kusi was inspired. And he decided to travel from community to community and try to inspire them to elevate and enhance their commitment to Judaism. Very nice, and he achieved it. There's no question about it. There are records of him visiting a community, and when a person preaches from the heart in honesty, he has an impact. What he focused on more than anything else was Jews being honest in business. And he claimed that the reason we are in exile is because, unfortunately, we are cutting corners. We're not honest. And he says that if Jews are not honest, and then they suffer, you know what the Gentiles will say, well, they deserve it, they're not honest. If on the other hand, we sanctify the name of God by having complete honesty, then we will do a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. There was a story in the news a few weeks ago, and in one of these fast food garbage stores, I don't know if one of these like Burger King's, White Castle, there was a blind person ordering some food. And the blind person dropped a $20 bill. A woman behind him realizes that, hey, free money, right? So she picks up the $20 and she decides to keep it for herself. The young boy, the 19-year-old cashier, said to her, I am not giving you anything until you go ahead and give the money back to the person. And she said, you just do your job, young man. You know, your job is to serve me my saturated fat, and your job is not to question my ethics, and he would not serve her. Somehow, you know how it is, these things get onto YouTube, Facebook, and he became recognized throughout the Jewish world, right? The world, not Jewish, the world, period. Halavai, the Jewish world. We have such stories as where the fellow in Boston, was it the fellow who had a facility, was a factory, burned down, did not have to pay his workers, but due to his ethics, Firstein. Those are good stories. Jews, that when it comes to areas of money, in other words, we have wonderful stories of Jews who buy, the Knightus esrog and get, they build a nice, so that's very nice, they're very special. But we have to realize that we're going to make an impact on the world. The impact will be when it comes to monetary issues. And maybe due to its significance, it's our greatest Yetzer Hara. You know, the Jew finding a bargain is a Yom Tov, it seems like. And that's our Yetzer Hara. It's where we're challenged. And that's where we have to have the ability to overcome it and sanctify the name of God. And that's what he was talking about. Honesty is what will achieve it. And we have to remember that we have a unique mission of reaching out to the world. Now listen to this incredible statement of the Talmud. The Talmud tells us, why are the Jews in exile? You want to know why the Jews are in exile? Why were the Jews dispersed throughout planet Earth? Kidei shetasfu alehem gerim. That we should have people converting to Judaism. People inspired by the Jewish people, inspired by their true essence, and say, you know what? I want to be like that as well. That's our mission in exile. That's what the Talmud states. Now, you might ask yourself, wait a second, exile is always focused on as such a negative thing. In other words, mipnei chataenu galinu me'artzenu. Oy, we are in exile, that's awful. And then we go ahead and make a declaration that, you know what, we can do things. If we act in a specific way, we inspire the world, we do a Kiddush Hashem, and people say, I want to join that nation. So which one is it? Right? Is it a bad thing or is it a good thing? Judaism believes that there are many areas where the spiritual realm is having an effect on the world. But we have to be careful to see the difference between areas where we play a role and areas where we are passive. And let me explain what I mean. In many traditions, not just in Jewish tradition, women going through painful labor brings about atonement for the sin of Chava. Now we have it in our faith, we share it with others as well. There's a concept, okay? So, a woman, you hear this? I mean, again, I cannot explain what it is. I'm aware of it. The Baruch Hashem, I merited to be there when it's happening. But this is what the rabbis tell us. So now, theoretically, a woman going through it could meditate if she wants, but now comes the question. A woman suffering through labor, and she realizes that she's achieving great things in the spiritual realm because this great sin of our ancestor Chava is being cleaned through my suffering. A nurse comes over and says, ma'am, do you want an epidural? And she says, epidural? What do you mean? Of course not. I'm in the middle of fixing the world. I want to suffer. Right? Now, what would you say to such a person?
Crazy.
She's crazy. But she'll argue, wait a second, I'm in the middle of fixing the spiritual realm. What do you mean you call me crazy? I'm doing such things that are so great. So which one is it? So we are believers that there are two things. The way the world works is there are areas where we achieve things by making right choices. And then there are things that when we are passive, they happen to occur. Yes, women who suffer does bring about some kind of atonement. We don't understand it. It is something that we accept exists, but we do not have to take an active role. A woman should not say, you know what, cause me more pain because I want to have that privilege of fixing all this. That's ridiculous. We have to sense what is occurring where I play a role. What is occurring where it happens to happen and I am passive? So for example, Jews in exile. There is no mitzvah for us to try to be in exile. There's no mitzvah. But if the reality is that we are there and we're doing the right thing, there'll be a positive impact. Okay? You know, this is a question even regarding the modern state of Israel. Right? We are believers that this is something that's historical. We're returning. We are believers that the fact that Christians are supporting us, if you talk about the religious Christians in the Bible Belt in the United States, that they're supporting the state of Israel, that too is something that you could say is a miracle. Now, we have to be very, very careful not to allow that to corrupt our way of using Judaism. There's a big threat. Stanley sent me this website. It's your brother that's involved, or it's brother-in-law. So this is a website that is tracking, unfortunately, rabbis who are very, very close to Christian supporters of Israel, which we're happy with it, we'll take it, but you have to be extremely careful with it, because their support for Israel is with an agenda. And their agenda, they might not spell it out to us, but they spell it out to others. That they have a belief that, yes, we all have to return to Israel, because we all have to be there for the second coming. And we have to be extremely careful that when we develop these close relationships with them, that we do not blur the lines of what we believe. In other words, we accept it, and we could even see it as the help and assistance of God. You know, that George W. Bush was supportive of Israel, right? We know very well that he allowed operations that previous U.S. presidents, especially ones that were affected by Nixon, would put a halt to Israel's progress, right? Whenever Israel is achieving anything in the battlefield, you know what? You know how you know that Israel is winning in the battlefield? When the UN calls for a ceasefire. That's their rule. Now, it is a reality that out of the White House, there was always such an attitude, with one exception, and that was George W. Bush. Reason being was that there was a miracle, that there was strong support from the area where he came from. There was extremely strong support for Israel due to their religious belief. Can we be thankful for it? Yes. But we cannot blur what we have to do. What we have to do is still stick to our guns and be very, very honest to what Christianity is about, that it's not Judaism, that we do not believe in JC, that we cannot go ahead and make declarations that he's like a rabbi for us. And I'm saying it because there are people that are already starting to blur their lines due to the fact that they are so thankful for the evangelicals. Yes, we could be thankful, but we have to realize there's a difference between what we do and realities that exist. Jew being in exile is a reality. We could do right things and have a positive impact. So my point is really that there are two avanim, there are two stones. There's the stone in Jerusalem itself where we build a temple, where we build in that temple a bedin agadol. We build a court that guides us. It is a stone that we know that we must listen to everything that comes from there. We are obligated to hear to the guidance that comes from the light, the teachings that come from that stone, from that temple in Jerusalem. But there is an impact out in the world as well. And what's happening here, when Yaakov Avinu is revealing the stone, and there's water, and he is megaleh, and he reveals what's under it, he is having an impact on the whole world, but we have to not let that impact the way we think. So that's a little bit about the stones idea. The Jerusalem temple is there for us to be guided. We welcome the world, we indeed welcome the world, but we always have to have that caution of realizing that it's not the realm where we make decisions. Now move to the end of the chapter, page 166, please. Page 166, there's a pact between Lavan and Yaakov. So please turn to verse 45. Vayikach Yaakov Aven. He's making a pact with his father-in-law. So he takes a stone, the third stone mentioned, and he places it as a matzeva, as a monument. Yaakov turns to his brethren and he says, gather stones. And they make a gal. They make a heap. Now, they go ahead, Vayikra lo Lavan, Lavan gives it a name in Aramaic, Yagar Sahaduta, and Yaakov calls it Galed. Galed. And this is an idea that there's a pact, there's a relationship between the two. Yaakov commits himself to treat the family of Lavan in a dignified way. Lavan commits himself to only be in peaceful manners. This is a heap, this is a gal, where we find a relationship between the two. This is a gal, this Galed. The Galed develops a strong bond between us, the Jewish people, and the world out there. There's something very unique here, that the Torah shares with us the translation of a word. Now, when you share a translation, when you translate a book, you are basically taking something that's part of your culture and sharing it with others. It has its role in Torah to share the culture with others, but there's something unique that in the Torah itself, a translation is provided. Right? Very interesting. But the name of this is a Galed. Now there are two words here you have to realize. Gal is legalo, to reveal. Ed is a testimony. And when you want to know about a location that brings about revelation and testimony, it's the Bet HaMikdash. It reveals to the world the existence of God. It's testimony. Edutu lebaei olam, that Shechina Shera Israel. It's testimony. So this Galed, which number one, the word itself indicates revelation and testimony. It is a place that links the family of Jacob, and the world out there. It is a place that has an Aramaic translation, symbolizes and links, as I mentioned earlier, this location to the temple in Jerusalem. Both of them serve the same idea, a place where we could interact and relate to the world out there, and indeed strengthen the relationship by it. So in the beginning of the Parsha, I talked about Haran, and then right afterwards, Bet HaMikdash. We talked about the vision that he had, that it's a border vision. This is the border that we are addressing. Gilad, Galed, is the Bet HaMikdash. Now, to share with you a midrash, when Moshe Rabbeinu is dying, or right before his passing, and God shows him the world. God shows him the history of the people of Israel and the land of Israel. So we are told, this in Bezot HaBracha, that God shows him even et Vayareu. I'm going to read it. God shows him et Kol Haaretz, the whole land, and et HaGilad. He shows him the Gilad. Comes the Midrash, a very old Midrash. Gilad is Ze Bet HaMikdash. The word Gilad, Gilui, revelation, Ed, testimony, that is the temple. So there's a very strong relationship here between Gilad, the region in northern Israel, and the temple. And the relationship is both of them bind us, relate to us, connect us to humanity. We are connected to humanity. I remember asking my father a question. We know that when they came into the land of Israel, one of the first things they did was record on stones translation of the Torah. That's what they did. Ba'er Heitev, and the rabbis tell us that they actually translated Torah according to some sections, according to some all of it. They translated the Torah on plaster, written on plaster, on stones. Obviously, if you translate it to other languages, there is an understanding that I have an agenda to teach the world the values of Torah. Correct? Next, we know, the rabbis tell us that the 8th, 9th, and 10th of the month of Tevet are dark days. They are awful days in our calendar. The 3 dark days. What was the big to-do? Why were those days defined as dark days? Reason being is because in the 2nd century before the Common Era, King Talmai of Egypt forced a group of rabbis to translate the Torah into Greek. So that was an awful thing, to translate the Torah into Greek. So I asked my father, why is it that on the one hand, we go ahead and within our tradition, we have the idea of translating the Torah on stones in the land of Israel, and then on the other hand, when they are translated out there in Egypt, we see it as a tremendous crisis. Why is it? So my father explained that when you translate, you relate to others. You relate to them. You are bringing them into your culture, into your life, into your values. You're having a dialogue. When I translate something, I'm having a dialogue. I'm having a conversation. To have a conversation, it has to be on your terms. In other words, I have no problem sitting down with a minister and having a conversation with him. And, we have things in common. We're both human. We're both in, providing the spiritual service. I have absolutely no problem. But there are my terms here. My terms are that I believe in Torah Messinai, and I do not believe in the fellow who was born 2013 years ago. I believe he existed, but nothing more. And I believe that you are absolutely wrong for elevating his status to where you have placed him. Those are my terms, and I'm not going to budge. I am not going to budge in the conversation. I'm very comfortable. It's on my territory. What if, on the other hand, I'm having a conversation with a guy like that, but he gave me $2 million for my shul, or my institution? Right? And then I meet him, and I have to have a good relationship with him, because besides the $2 million that he gave me, annually I'm getting $200,000. And I know that I have to be careful with what I say. Now you tell me, is the conversation on my term if I know very, very well that I have to be careful with what I say? The conversation is no longer on my term. And therefore, when they're in Egypt, and they have a gun put to their head and say, translate the Torah for us. And they had to actually make adjustments, we are told. They made adjustments. There are a few things that they translated a little bit differently because it was not on their terms. They didn't have the confidence. They weren't in their home territory. They were on, an away game. You have to make adjustments. That's very, very sad. And that's very, very dangerous. And therefore, we are believers. When Yaakov Avinu takes this Gilad, Galed, which is the temple, where he relates to the world outside, where there's a translation here, where he's relating to the world, it's on his terms. He did not budge one iota. He's a man of emet. And throughout, his declaration is to his father-in-law, I was by you for 20 years. 20 years I was honest, which is, of course, our mission in exile. To be honest, we're having a positive impact on the world when we are honest in the workplace. That's what Kiddush Hashem is. That's what Yaakov was about. I took care to the last penny. Everything was with complete honesty. And therefore he is able to relate to him and say to him at the end of the portion, this is a Gilad, this is a Galed, this is the temple. We can translate what's taking place because I can relate to you. The stone and the temple of Jerusalem is not just for us. The temple in Jerusalem is for all the nations. We welcome all the nations on our terms with zero adjustment. And as I mentioned earlier, that's the concern and I believe a threat. When people who support, when we're getting Christian money, there's a lot of Christian money coming to Israel. Evangelicals have a lot, and they love us. They love us to death as they have loved us to death for 2,000 years. They are people of love. They talk about love much more than us, right? We don't talk about love, but the reality is we never massacred a people or created an environment. They talk about it, and we know very well what their history is. One of the things I quote so often was people always try to claim that Hitler did not do it in the name of Christianity. Perhaps true, but if you look at Claude Lanzmann's Shoah film, where he interviews Polish peasants living perhaps a mile, perhaps less, away from a concentration camp. And they claim they didn't know anything about it. They didn't know anything about it. The smoke, they knew nothing. But they claimed, you know what, we didn't do it, but the Jews do deserve it, because after all, they did kill Christ. So, in other words, they accepted it as something that is given. That's a reality that exists, that what Christianity led to, and these are things that we have to spell out to them. And when I have a conversation, I do meet the specific fellow. I value him as a person, but when it comes to philosophy, it's 100%. First of all, it doesn't make any donations, so there's nothing corrupted there. No donation. I don't even let him pay for my coffee, because I don't want to have any effect. Because when someone gives you a coffee, you feel this love for them, right? Like. But there is absolutely nothing there. I do not allow that. But it has to be on our terms. And this is the essence of what's happening here. Translation, yes, it's a Gilad. Gilad is the Bet HaMikdash. We relate to them. We welcome them. But it's based and only what we believe without an adjustment. I thank you for listening. And it says from the Shalom to the travelers. And a good day to everyone.